Welcome to Food Talk, where we talk about food, fishing, farming, and all things East End. Today, my guests are Alan Salkin, the author of From Scratch, The Uncensored History of the Food Network, and TV royalty, Geoffrey Drummond, who is currently the executive director of the Food Lab at SUNY Southampton, Stonybrook, or Stonybrook, Southampton.
All of that stuff.
Welcome to Food Talk, guys.
Thank you.
Delighted to have you. The first time, I think, no, that's not true. I was going to say non-chefs, but be that as it may, Alan, I've known you for a while. You're a good pal. I've seen you at the South Beach Wine and Food Festival, which was a fun occasion where we got to hobnob on the beach. Tell us about this book, because this is a great read, and it's the inside story of the Food Network.
Available on Amazon. Well, it's funny you mentioned South Beach, because I got a call from a publicist around 2006 who said, you got to write a story about this thing. It's like spring break for chefs. It's crazy. It's down. And it's a festival in Florida. And I asked the most important question, being a reporter in the Northeast. I was then working for the New York Times about this food festival in Florida, which was, when is it? February. I'm extremely interested. So luckily my editor agreed to this. I flew down there. I wrote an article about Lee Schrager, who actually spends his summers here in August, but runs the New York and the South Beach Food and Wine Festival. But I was amazed when I saw that people like Bobby Flay and Emeril and Giada had like handlers and agents. I didn't know about this.
Right.
And I have a policy as a reporter. I don't write about the Kennedys, World War II, or the Mafia, because everyone else does. I like to find new things to write about. So anyway, this was right when Emeril had done his $50 million deal selling a lot of his businesses to Martha Stewart.
Right.
Ultimately, when I left the New York Times, I was looking for an interesting project that would also get some attention and be a fun world to be a part of. And I realized, food stars, how did it all happen? And when you really sort of distill it, how did we go from just the shows on PBS and food being something in just like the metropolitan areas of the country? How did it become that you could get kale, in the middle of the country? And the answer was Food Network. And so the book just sort of details the rise starting in '93 all the way up till now.
But when the book came out, the Food Network they weren't all that happy about it. What can you tell us about that?
Ultimately, Food Network started, no one actually started in a studio not entirely unlike this, a guy who ran a small, worked at Providence Cable TV in Rhode Island. And it was his idea, and people thought it was a bad idea at first. Who wants to watch 24 hours a day of food 7 days a week, right?
Yeah, well, I have some background on that too. So.
Well, Geoffrey is involved in every piece of.
Well, we're going to get to the king
no,
later.
No,
this is
but
royalty.
I'm talking about in particular with Providence.
Oh, interesting. Well, they went to New York. They started this first studio was near like the Lincoln Tunnel. It was a terrible neighborhood. If you want to see what it looks like, watch The Deuce on HBO. That's pretty much it. And but they took chances in the early days. They weren't making money, so there was this appreciation for creativity and chance taking. And out of that, you get crazy shows like Emeril Live, with a live band and people screaming when a guy threw garlic on something, and it was this like it was a new thing, and it really was like rock and roll in the early days, where there wasn't so much money in it, but there was a lot of fun in it. You also get them taking crazy chances, like putting something like Iron Chef on the air, a dubbed Japanese television show. Alton Brown's Good Eats, a guy writing on a cow with chalk. And then ultimately they sold most of it to Scripps. So in the early days there was this crazy business structure, which is a lot about in the book. A lot of little cable companies around the country own pieces of it. It consolidates with Scripps, which is in Knoxville, Tennessee, a very conservative company. They also own HGTV. Right now they're in the midst of being acquired by Discovery, and there's a chance they're going to move the entire Food Network out of New York to Silver Spring, Maryland, where I don't know how you get grouper. But anyway, and they've become more and more conservative, and more scared of everything. And to me, it's a love letter to the Food Network, but they are so buttoned down and want so much control over everything that they're just scared that, if I write that Mario Batali or somebody else was like partying one night, it's going to ruin some image that they have that makes them safe to sell soap and toothpaste. Because ultimately, that is the business of the Food Network, selling cars.
They were also a little bit uptight that you were even attending the Food Network sponsored event, because I remember there was a whole thing about your credentials and all that. We'll get back to that. What I also want to let our viewers know, that this is a man, anybody that likes Seinfeld, this is a man that wrote a book about Festivus.
The holiday for
so
Festivus.
if you want to know Alan Salkin. Now, meanwhile, back at the studio, we have Geoffrey Drummond here. So you're the executive director of the Food Lab. So before we get to your rich past, which includes producing Dinner with Andre, what's going on at the Food Lab, and what's your role there? Because this is a fascinating entity that we have out here in the
I
East
will
End.
talk about the food. I do want to get back to
I want to
because
hear
there's
it.
some great backstories on what you were talking about, Alan. But the Food Lab was created about 3 years ago out here as a result of ongoing conversations with Bob Reeves, who was the provost at the Southampton campus overseeing the creative arts programs. And thank you. And we basically decided to create a center of communication, community, and conversation of all around food. Not so much about how to cook, but why to cook and how we eat. So it really is about our relationship to food. And we've brought in, every year we have a big conference. We have 250 to 300 people attending. Last year we did have Bobby Flay as one of our keynotes, along with David Barber, who's partner running Stone Barns in
Blue Hill.
Westchester, Blue Hill at Stone Barns. Amanda Hesser, who runs Food 52, along with Meryl Stubbs, her partner on that. Eric Rippert has been there. Carla Hall, who is one of the stars of The Chew and was kind of the most beloved of the Top Chef people. So it's been terrific, and we're looking to, we're on this amazing 80-plus acre campus that looks like a farm.
Yes.
And should be a farm.
Yes.
I don't know what the economics are, but
Maybe one day.
But it would be a great. Well, it's definitely going. It's going to be a hospital. They're going to move Southampton Hospital there, and I think hopefully as we become more and more interested in issues around nutrition and kind of disentangling real from fake stuff about nutrition. Which was one of the big points at our conference last year, actually, was how to kind of determine what are the real things that are going on in nutrition versus what's kind of totally made up fantasy stuff, without getting into any particular people that are doing that.
Well, it's just so wonderful to have that so close to us. And I always have events the same weekend that I have to attend the same weekend that you guys are there, and I just got to change that. I've got to figure out how to get
Well,
there.
we have some terrific speakers. We have amazing food. All through the day, topped with it's a 2-day event.
It's in early June, right?
It's in early June,
usually second
although
weekend.
next year it will be in the fall, I think, because it'll probably be right around
Harvest time.
right around harvest time, which is terrific because we'll get all of the terrific produce, but it's mostly a result of the U.S. Open coming and taking all the parking spaces.
Didn't think of that.
But we do. We have this great gala dinner, and if we do this in the fall, we will totally blow it out. People from The Art of Eating did this dinner last year.
Oh,
and,
Cheryl and John, they're
Cheryl
tremendous.
and John, they were just so great.
Yeah. Oh, I love them. So you have produced cooking shows.
Wait, what's the Food Network story?
Okay,
Oh,
so
yeah,
we're going to go back
go
to
ahead.
okay. No, so we can jump, but no, because I got involved in doing food television when it was only public television, and when PBS stations in major markets had 20% share of the whole market, and now it's probably 0.20%,
Yeah.
if they're lucky.
I know.
If they're lucky. They still do a lot of food shows, but we were the place for doing
right.
food shows, and I was producing Julia Child shows. I was
Oh, I know the
producing
story. Okay, I think I know.
Lydia, Jacques Pepin, Martin Yan, and
Eric Rippert.
Yeah, later on.
Right.
But that was much later on. But this is all pre-Food Network.
Right.
So in the early 90s, when Food Network started, as Alan was saying, they weren't sure what they were doing. The idea came about, Reese Schoenfeld, who was the person who originally envisioned CNN.
Yeah, he started CNN.
He started-
Ted had sort of the idea, and then Reese really made it happen.
You know, the idea, he came up with this partly because they saw the economics. Hey, you know, look at Julia's show. One of the reasons cooking shows became so doable was that you put somebody in a kitchen and they cooked, and you weren't going on location, and people were, it was all about the recipe and then about the personality. When Food Network started in 92, Alan, I think it was.
It was November '93. It went on the air, but yeah.
So, I mean, they just wanted to plunk people in front of the camera. They were doing, I would say, Emerald would do 6 shows, one right after the other,
Right.
all in a day.
They had a no stopping rule.
They,
there
you just
was no editing.
went, they had carts that were like entire kitchen sets that they would roll out in front of him, open out, and he would cook. They struggled in the beginning. They struggled for the first couple of years, and as Alan mentioned, they were originally owned by Providence Journal, and they were owned by a company, Belo, in Texas, and nobody made any money on it. It wasn't happening. And it wasn't until Emerald really hit his stride that it took off. And then it was like the Emerald Network, because he was on
Right.
8-10 hours a day.
Right.
But Emerald to me is Julia is the queen mom,
Yep.
and lovely, incredible person who we can talk about. Emerald is the person that I think did more to put cooking on the map
Yeah.
than any. He brought men, first of all,
Right.
to watching, and people just loved him as a person connected with food, and he got people interested in eating rather than just
97. The
consuming.
show went on in '97, Emerald Live. The one that really.
Yeah.
He had other shows before.
No,
that.
before that, but they
Yeah, that
weren't
was when he
really,
popped,
he
yeah.
just was
Found
great.
his voice.
But there was something about Emerald. We did, with Julia, I was the first person to put him
Right, Cooking with
on
Master Chefs.
television in Cooking with Master Chefs, and we kind of really didn't know him. But it spoke to his amazing ability to connect with audience. So Julia went down, we went down on location with Julia. We did a whole bit at Emerald's restaurant. We went to dinner there the night before we were going to tape with him in his home kitchen there, or a home kitchen. It actually wasn't his home kitchen. It was some big house that we could get into.
Giving away the secrets.
And Emerald kind of gathered his people, and before we came in, I heard this after, before we came in, he gathered his entire crew into the kitchen, and he said, guys, do you know what's happening? Julia Child is coming to our restaurant.
She's
This is
awesome.
Emerald's. And the guys were kind of, oh, great, great. He said, no, you guys don't understand.
Right.
It's Julia. And he led them on a run all the way around the entire block, that his restaurant, just to get their endorphins going and to get them up.
Poplar Street or whatever it's called.
And yeah, exactly. I can't.
You told me that story when I interviewed you, I think in Soho, and it's actually in the book.
Oh, okay.
That story is in the book.
Oh,
That was
yeah,
a
I
great
read
story.
it.
Yeah.
Great book.
That's a great story, because he
yeah.
felt like their adrenaline wasn't going. They didn't understand. This is Julia Child. She's,
And let's
royalty.
talk about Julia Child's personality.
But then they ate together. He did this crab and crawfish boil in the backyard of this house in the Garden District. And you may actually have footage of this, but he cooked dumped this entire barrel of crawfish and crabs and corn and artichokes on the table, on the newspaper on the table, and then taught Julia how to eat crawfish by pinching the tail and sucking the head.
Yes.
Which she loved, and she said, "This is so good."
Oh, she's wonderful.
And she was wonderful. But that show became the lead show in the series. Nobody knew who Emeril was at that time. He had not been on TV. He had been cooking at Commander's Palace in New Orleans, opened his own restaurant. But there was something so special about him that in a series with Alice Waters, Jacques Pepin, Lydia actually was in, all these people, he was the one who had the lead show.
Now, tell us a little bit about Julia Child's personality, because I think that a lot of people just think of her as that's like an old matronly woman. She was anything but. She had this incredible personality. I remember
she was
watching
old.
her. Yeah, she was right, but she was old, but she had this incredible energy.
Yeah.
So maybe give us an anecdote about Julia. I was reading about the cook-off that she had with Jacques Pepin about the 3-inch burger, but just give our listeners.
Well, I mean, the great thing about Julia was that we worked together doing TV until she was 88 years old.
Amazing.
So it was amazing and full of energy. We did a shift, and it's really when I started working with her, when we started working with other chefs. She became the introducer, and I believe is really responsible for initiating the whole celebrity chef thing when we did this Master Chef, and she loved it. They were her progeny in a way.
Right.
She delighted in the fact that these people were serious cooks and it wasn't anything about what she had done, but it was about what they were doing, and it was almost as if she could see into what was going to be the future.
She put Mary Sue Milliken and Susan Feniger. Was that the first Master Chefs?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the two hot tamales, and they're still like...
But that was before they were the hot tamales, and they were
women
they
chefs.
had City in LA,
right.
and were cooking kind of very Indian-y food, and she didn't like that food. I mean, Julia
really?
basically loved French food.
Right.
And ultimately, after doing a lot of these shows where she presented other chefs, I put together a live stage show with Julia and Jacques called Cooking in Concert, and where they performed on stage in front of 500 people or 600 people at Boston University as a fundraiser.
Are
and
there
they were
tapes?
hysterical.
Are there tapes?
Yeah, yeah. PBS has them, and we have them in kind of composite reels, but the two of them together were just magic. And part of it was a combination of they both spoke the same language.
Right.
There was a huge amount of respect that they each had for each other. And Jacques was incredibly generous with Julia. I mean, there's a lot of talk and there are a lot of stories about being competitive, which they were a little bit in terms of, I like this, I don't like black pepper, I don't like white, But basically, Jacques was there for Julia. He is technically, he's probably the greatest chef ever in terms of technical skills and cooking vocabulary, and he's very, very smart. And he had a way of anticipating Julia's needs, especially as she was getting older. So he was always there to assist in a kind of almost invisible way.
Oh, sweet.
So all of the publicity played up their little arguments or whatever, but they loved it and they so enjoyed working with each other.
But she had a great line because they were making a dish which was maybe a stuffed mushroom with spinach, and she said that that the spinach was a little bit tough, and he said, well maybe.
No. What happened was that they did it. It was a kind of vegetarian-y thing, and they stuffed mushrooms with sautéed spinach.
Right.
And Jacques gave it to Julia, and he said, "Here, Julia, try this." And Julia said, "Well, I think it's a little tough, Jacques." She'd call him Jack. And he tasted, well, it doesn't taste tough to me, Julia. And she said, well, you must have sharper teeth
Yeah,
than I
that
do.
was a great line. Sharper teeth.
Yeah.
I would remember that.
Yeah.
All right, quick.
That was easy.
Let's just change subjects, because on this show we always have a Stump the Chef. In this case, it's Stump the Food Personalities, the food experts. So we're going to do a little roulette, Food Lovers Companion roulette. And so the word that I'd like you men to discover, or rather describe, is brunoise.
I think you probably know. I think brunoise is a style of chopping in which the pieces have to be about an inch square.
It's a larger version of a mirepoix.
Well done, men. Well done.
We got it?
Yes, it means just simmered in butter. So this is only the second time in about 20 shows that I've been stumped, that is to say, because Claudia Fleming, as I mentioned before we went on air, got a cheese, but well done. I thought that was a good one. You were either going to get it or not.
Right.
So well done, men. Now,
And then you have to remember
Yes,
what it
ex-
is.
Well, I
Well,
could have come up with something that said like brunoise. I believe it was invented by a French chef named Bruno
exactly.
and his wife Louise. Bruno Louise.
So you guys are you guys know a lot of chefs, but also
Bruno Louise.
Bryn Louise.
Okay, go ahead.
5 people that you would invite to dinner, dead or alive.
You know, I've gone
In
through
todo
this
el
again.
mundo.
You know, Henry Miller I'd like to dine with, really my inspiration probably to become a writer. And I've gone back and forth about this. You know, I had an idea of one dinner party that would be like the Buddha, Jesus Christ, and maybe Hitler, and they would like try to talk him out of it. You know what I mean? Let's see if we could really get something going at this dinner. And then I thought Babe Ruth, because you had a guy who talked about Lou Gehrig, and it's like, Gehrig would be a boring dinner guest. This is supposed to be fun. You know, Babe Ruth would like try to eat everything.
Yes,
and
he
there'd be
would.
Like he'd drink too much, and there'd be a whole, and his backstory is being an orphan. And,
Right, yeah.
you know, Ernest Hemingway would probably be, if he was not in his depressed phase.
Right.
I go on. Joan Didion I thought would be nice, but she as you know, she speaks kind of quietly, and I don't know if she'd be a fun. Anyway, it's probably a bunch of writers and sports figures and like spiritual leaders and.
Good list. What do you got, Geoffrey?
I think I'd like to do a dinner that would be potluck, where I'd invite people who would all bring something really fabulous. As such, I know Julia is probably a real popular choice, Julia Child.
The number one choice.
She is my kind of spiritual leader and mentor and so on. I would definitely invite her. I would invite Eric Rippert, who I work with and love spending time with, and I know he'd bring a great dish. Probably not fish, but maybe a great paella, which he does. Right. I would invite Jim Salter, who was a dear friend who lived out here, writer, and good cook, and lover of great food, and author with his wife of a book called Life is Meals, which is so appropriate. Jim Harrison, just to add a little bit of both good cook and good drinking to the table. And I'd love to invite, am I using up my fine? I'm assuming I'm having this dinner with my wife, Barbara Thomas, who I would,
She's a
because
given. She's a given.
She's a
in.
given
She's in.
because I do all dinners with her, and we share the kitchen and every place else. And Jeremiah Tower, who was just, and probably still is, I haven't seen him in a while, and he is one of the great chefs, was really the founding chef at Alice Waters Chez Panisse.
Correct.
Creator of a lot of those original
Good new
recipes.
documentary out about him.
And Tony Bourdain
Yes.
did a documentary about him, and just a great, literate, interesting guy. So that's my dinner table.
Oh, that's a lovely table. We got about a minute left. Best thing about living on the East End?
Well, the ingredients, you know, I mean, obviously that mixture of the sea and the farms, but like I know all the farm stands, I know where you get the fish, and I can cook out here better than I can cook anywhere else because I know where to go to get the ingredients and how they, you just feel them in the air and how they work together.
And it's all close by because I know where you live, so you
Yeah.
don't. You can get the whole thing in about under
Or
1
I
hour.
just go to your kitchen and steal
Yeah,
it.
that's right. Geoffrey, what about yourself?
I love the light out here. We live in Springs, about just a little bit up from where Jackson Pollock lived,
Sure.
and the
We're in the
light
same
every
neighborhood, yeah.
afternoon
Yeah.
is just
Yeah, it is.
amazing.
It
And I
is.
love the people out here. It's an amazing mix of people, and when they can let down and forget about summer season and all of the and traffic and so on, it's just a terrific, terrific place.
Very diplomatically said.
Well done. What are you working on right now?
I have a scripted show based on this book, like a comedy, and I also have an article coming by the time this airs. Maybe it'll be out in Esquire online about some interesting intrigue on a food show.
I like it. So that's all we have time for today. We could talk to you guys for a whole nother show. To my viewers, I say, cógelo suave, pero cógelo. Take it easy, but take it.
It was fun.